The median American family approaching retirement has accumulated just $185,000 in savings, despite earning over $2.5 million throughout their working lives. That massive gap isn't caused by market crashes or low salaries, but by three invisible middle-class wealth habits that silently siphon away compounding growth. By the end of this breakdown, you will see the exact mathematical framework that turns an ordinary $75,000 income into a $2.4 million portfolio without extreme frugality. Trending most financial advice tells you to cut out morning coffee, yet the real drain is happening inside the structural financial products designed specifically for middle earners. If you want the real story behind money, subscribe to the channel and let's get into it. Meet Mark, an engineer taking home $85,000 a year who follows every conventional rule. He bought a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs and saves 5% of his paycheck. He genuinely believes his $400,000 home is his primary retirement asset, mistaking a leveraged lifestyle expense for a productive compounding engine. During the first decade of a standard 30-year mortgage at 6.5% interest, nearly 80% of every monthly payment goes directly to the bank, building zero equity. Treating a primary residence like a stock portfolio is like using a checking account that charges a 2% annual property tax and demands $8,000 a year in roof repairs just to sit still. Now consider Sarah, who earns the exact same $85,000 salary but treats housing strictly as overhead while directing her capital toward income-producing assets. Instead of upgrading to a larger home after a promotion, Sarah capped her housing costs at 22% of her gross income and automated a $1,200 monthly investment. While Mark checks the retirement box at work, he leaves his contributions parked in an employer default target date fund carrying a 0.75% expense ratio. That fraction of a percent fee sounds harmless, but over a 35-year career, Wall Street firms will quietly extract over $140,000 from his compounding returns just for holding basic bonds. It is the financial equivalent of hiring a marathon runner to carry a 40-pound backpack for the entire race, wondering why they never reach top speed. Sarah bypassed active management entirely, allocating her automated contributions into a broad S&P 500 index fund with an ultra-low 0.03% expense ratio, yet avoiding high fees is only half the equations. Mark also made the classic mistake of putting every single savings dollar into a pre-tax traditional 401k. By deferring all his tax obligations until age 73, he's building a silent partnership with the IRS that guarantees future required minimum distributions will force him into a higher tax bracket. To eliminate future tax risk, Sarah maxed out her Roth IRA first, locking in today's known tax rate so her growth compounds completely tax-free forever. With housing and retirement accounts optimized, the biggest divergence in their long-term wealth comes down to how they finance transportation. The average new car payment in the United States has reached $738 a month, transforming reliable commuter vehicles into the single greatest destroyer of middle-class net worth. When his old sedan needed repairs, Mark signed a 5-year loan at 7% interest for a $42,000 SUV, convincing himself he needed the upgrade for daily reliability, predicting that exact $738 monthly payment into a low-cost index fund, earning a historical 8% return, generates over $1.1 million across a 30-year period. Financing a depreciating automobile is like buying an ice sculpture on a credit card while paying monthly interest as it melts away on your front porch. In stark contrast, Sarah purchased a reliable 3-year-old sedan for $18,000 in cash, keeping her monthly automotive overhead at zero. Even when middle earners successfully avoid consumer debt, they frequently fall into a psychological safety trap, hoarding excessive cash in brick-and-mortar checking accounts. Mark keeps an emergency fund of $30,000 sitting in a legacy bank savings account yielding 0.01%, effectively paying an inflation tax that erodes $900 of purchasing power every year. Meanwhile, Sarah maintains her 6-month safety net in a treasury-backed money market fund yielding 5.1%, turning cash preservation into a productive income stream. The fundamental difference between their trajectories isn't luck or extreme frugality, but grasping that wealth creation happens exponentially rather than linearly. In a 40-year investment horizon, nearly 60% of your total wealth is generated during the final decade of compounding, provided you never interrupt the cycle. But keeping that compounding cycle unbroken requires surviving the 3 catastrophic financial shocks that statistically wipe out 40% of middle-class families between ages 45 and 55. This brings us directly to the primary residence trap that keeps Mark's net worth looking impressive on paper while his actual liquidity bleeds out. The hidden mechanism here is unrecoverable cost. Property taxes, insurance, and routine maintenance quietly consume 3% to 5% of his home's market value every single year. When you run the actual amortization math on his 30-year mortgage at 6.5%, paying off a $300,000 loan balance requires over $680,000 in total cash out of pocket. This exposes the middle class's most dangerous blind spot, confusing forced savings with true productive asset growth. While residential real estate historically appreciates at roughly 4% annually nationwide, inflation and ongoing carrying costs drag the real net return down to near zero. Think of your primary home like a high-end storage unit you get to sleep in, enjoy the shelter, but never mistake it for your retirement engine. So if the house isn't doing the heavy lifting, where is Mark actually parking the cash he wants to multiply? He defaults to the standard corporate 401k menu, placing his entire future into a one-size-fits-all target date fund. By automatically shifting heavily into low-yielding bonds by age 45, this fund intentionally caps his compounding velocity right when his balance reaches critical mass. Even worse is the fee drag. A seemingly harmless 0.75% expense ratio on an actively managed fund will cannibalize over 20% of his potential gains over a 30-year career. Wall Street charges you a premium for constant trading activity, yet lasting wealth is built almost entirely through intentional, disciplined inactivity. Paying high fund fees is like driving a sports car with the emergency brake engaged. You burn twice the fuel just to keep pace with the traffic around you. True wealth builders skip the active managers entirely, buying broad market index funds like the S&P 500 to let American businesses compound their capital for 15 basis points or less. Yet, even with low-cost index funds in place, another silent wealth killer drains Mark's paycheck on the 1st and 15th of every month: tax inefficiency. As a W-2 engineer earning $120,000, he loses roughly 28% of every marginal dollar to federal and state taxes before it ever hits his checking account. The middle class tries to build financial independence using leftover post-tax dollars, whereas seasoned investors accumulate productive assets with pre-tax capital. Consider the mechanism of the health savings account when structured properly. An HSA functions as a legal triple tax shelter that most families mistakenly treat as a simple medical debit card. By investing his $4,150 annual contribution into equities and paying routine medical bills out of pocket, Mark transforms a basic healthcare benefit into a stealth retirement trust. After 2 decades of compounding at an 8% average return, that single habit generates over $200,000 of completely tax-free liquid wealth. This contrast highlights a deeper psychological divide. How the middle class defines a safe financial buffer compared to how wealth builders structure liquidity. Mark keeps $30,000 parked in a traditional brick-and-mortar checking account, yielding a trivial 0.05% APY because seeing the static balance gives him emotional comfort. In reality, an inflation rate of 3% is systematically evaporating $900 of purchasing power from that stagnant cash pile every single year. A smart money habit shifts that emergency reserve into a treasury bill ladder or a high-yield cash sweep, currently generating around 5.2% risk-free. That simple optimization turns a leaking bucket into an active income generator, paying him over $1,500 annually just for holding his safety net. However, optimizing cash and slashing fees won't save you if you fall prey to the most seductive middle-class trap of all, the monthly payment illusion. When Mark landed a $10,000 raise last year, he immediately upgraded to a $650 monthly car payment, convinced his higher salary justified the luxury. Here is the brutal opportunity cost of that decision. Investing that exact same $650 every month into an S&P 500 index fund over 25 years yields over $580,000. He isn't just buying transportation. He is literally trading more than $500,000 of future freedom for 5 years of new car smell. This reveals the fundamental rule of wealth acceleration. Every pay bump must purchase income-producing assets before it ever funds lifestyle upgrades. Once you automate that asset first rule, a profound structural shift happens in your portfolio, one that unlocks the secret to true financial optionality in your 50s. Take the typical $400,000 suburban home, which most families mistakenly view as their ultimate wealth generator. Once you factor in unrecoverable property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, its real financial return drops dramatically. Consider Mark and Sarah, a representative middle-class couple earning $95,000 who sink 38% of their after-tax income into mortgage payments and home upkeep. They feel wealthy on paper, but their monthly cash flow is completely paralyzed. The hidden wealth killer here is structural depreciation. Every dollar spent replacing a $12,000 roof or aging HVAC system is dead capital that never compounds. Your house is a place to live, not an income-producing asset. Over a standard 30-year mortgage at 6.5% interest, the family will pay over $500,000 in interest alone just for the privilege of ownership. That is $500,000 transferred directly to the bank's balance sheet instead of your own investment portfolio. Treating your residence as a primary savings vehicle also traps you in illiquidity. You cannot buy groceries with home equity without paying a lender hefty fees to borrow against your own bricks and mortar. True wealth builders focus instead on acquiring productive capital, such as equities and business interests that generate cash flow without requiring constant physical repair. This shift from physical maintenance to compounding assets changes everything about your trajectory. This widespread misunderstanding of real estate naturally bleeds into the second major middle-class habit: how families manage their workplace retirement accounts. Most people treat their 401k as a passive check-the-box exercise rather than an active compounding engine. While 68% of private industry workers have access to an employer-sponsored plan, the median balance for Americans in their 50s is hovering around just $60,000. That figure is nowhere near enough to sustain 25 years of retirement without severe lifestyle cuts. The real culprit behind those stagnant balances isn't just low contribution rates, it is the silent erosion caused by high mutual fund expense ratios inside default target date funds. Wall Street quietly skims a percentage of your capital every single year regardless of market performance. A seemingly tiny 1.2% fee difference on a $10,000 annual investment evaporates over $180,000 in potential compounding returns over 3 decades. You take 100% of the financial risk, yet fund managers pocket nearly a third of your lifetime growth. Think of high expense ratios like a leaky pipe in your home's plumbing, a constant unseen drip that eventually drains your entire reservoir. Plugging that leak by switching to low-cost index funds is the easiest raise you will ever give yourself. Smart money bypasses those active managers entirely by utilizing broad market index funds with expense ratios as low as 0.03%. This simple mechanical switch ensures that compounding works for your family rather than for a fund manager's bonus. Yet Mark and Sarah still leave massive money on the table every payday by contributing only 3% of their salary, missing their employer's full 5% matching threshold. They are walking away from free capital simply because they haven't audited their payroll elections. That missed 2% employer match represents an instant, guaranteed 100% return on investment, a mathematical advantage you will never find anywhere else in the financial markets. Failing to capture it is the exact equivalent of refusing a guaranteed pay raise. Over 25 years of compounding at historical market averages, passing up that simple company match costs an average family more than $310,000 in future wealth. That single administrative oversight can mean the difference between retiring at 60 or working until 70. Even when middle-class families optimize their workplace accounts, they frequently stumble into a third psychological trap: the illusion of safety in cash holdings. This fear of short-term volatility causes them to hoard excess money in the wrong financial vehicles. Millions of households proudly hold $40,000 sitting idle in traditional brick-and-mortar savings accounts that yield a microscopic 0.05% annual interest. They mistake nominal price stability for true financial security. They feel secure because the dollar balance on their monthly statement never drops, completely ignoring the invisible tax of inflation. In reality, their purchasing power is bleeding out day by day. When annual inflation runs at just 3.5%, that static $40,000 cash balance loses roughly $1,400 in real spending power every 12 months. You are paying a heavy price just to watch your money sit still. Holding excess cash for years is like trying to run upward on a downward escalator. No matter how hard you save, the ground is moving against you. Cash is a tool for liquidity, never a strategy for wealth building. Seasoned investors treat cash strictly as a short-term shield, maintaining a precise 3 to 6 month emergency reserve to handle life's inevitable surprises. Every dollar above that strict threshold is assigned a specific job in the market. They systematically move excess liquidity into treasury bills or high-yield cash equivalents, paying over 4.5%, capturing real yields while waiting to deploy capital into equities. This ensures their defensive reserves are fighting inflation rather than succumbing to it. This strict separation between short-term safety reserves and long-term compounding capital leads directly to how the middle class handles borrowing. How you manage debt is the ultimate watershed line between stagnation and financial independence. The average middle-class family routinely borrows money to purchase depreciating lifestyle assets such as financing a $45,000 SUV over 84 months at 7% interest. They trade their future financial freedom for the fleeting comfort of a new car smell. That new vehicle loses 20% of its resale value the moment it leaves the dealership lot, yet the suffocating monthly loan payment remains locked in for 7 years. This structural cash flow drain makes consistent investing mathematically impossible. By year 5, Mark and Sarah have paid over $12,000 in pure financing interest for a machine that is now worth less than half of its original sticker price. They have effectively reversed the engine of compounding, paying interest to banks instead of earning it for themselves. In sharp contrast, the wealthy view debt not as a consumer subsidy, but as a surgical instrument to acquire cash-flowing, appreciating assets. They only borrow money when the expected return of the investment significantly exceeds the cost of the loan. They master the mathematical divide between destructive consumer debt that attacks monthly cash flow and strategic leverage that builds equity. Recognizing this distinction transforms debt from a lifelong trap into a powerful accelerator. Eliminating that single $700 monthly auto payment and avoiding high-interest consumer credit instantly liberates hundreds of dollars in structural cash flow every month. That freed capital is the exact fuel needed to build a lasting financial fortress. When that newly liberated cash flow is redirected into automated low-cost index investing, it triggers the most reliable wealth-building mechanism ever devised. This simple shift from paying consumer interest to earning compound returns is how everyday families achieve lasting financial independence. While lifestyle inflation drains the bank accounts of high earners, an even deeper trap lies in how they invest what is left over. Take Mark, who earns $120,000 a year and diligently saves $1,500 a month, yet his net worth has barely budged in 5 years. His money isn't disappearing at the mall, it is being quietly siphoned away by Wall Street through actively managed mutual funds charging a hefty 1.5% expense ratio. Most middle-class investors ignore this tiny percentage, unaware of the mathematical devastation it causes over a lifetime. Paying a 1.5% investment fee is like trying to run up a down escalator. You expend tremendous energy just to stay in the exact same place. Every dollar taken by fund managers is a dollar stripped of its ability to compound exponentially. Over a 30-year investing horizon, that seemingly harmless 1.5% fee will devour over $340,000 of Mark's potential returns. He is taking 100% of the market risk while forfeiting nearly a third of his lifetime wealth to fund managers who rarely beat the market. Contrast Mark's approach with Sarah, a steady accumulator making just $75,000 a year who invests $800 monthly into a simple S&P 500 index fund. She pays a microscopic 0.03% expense ratio, keeping 99.97% of her compounding engine working for her own future. Instead of paying expensive experts to hunt for the needle in the haystack, Sarah simply buys the entire haystack. By capturing the roughly 10% historical annual return of the US stock market without fee drag, she is on track to amass over $1.7 million in 3 decades. High fees are only the first leak in Mark's bucket, however, because his workplace 401k strategy contains an even more expensive blind spot. He currently contributes just 3% of his salary, completely misunderstanding how employer matching actually builds wealth. Mark's company offers a dollar-for-dollar match up to 6%, but he skips the extra 3% because he wants that cash in his checking account today. By hoarding short-term liquidity, he is walking away from $3,600 a year in free money. An employer match is not just a nice corporate perk, it represents an instantaneous, guaranteed 100% return on your capital. No hedge fund manager on earth can promise to double your money the second you invest it. Yet millions of middle-class workers ignore this mechanism every single pay period. Over a 25-year career, skipping that 3% match costs Mark roughly $380,000 in lost compounded growth. He has voluntarily taken a six-figure pay cut simply because no one explained the exponential cost of leaving free capital on the table. Sarah, on the other hand, automated her 401 contributions on her very first day of work to capture every single cent of her employer match. This frictionless automation forces her capital to grow before she ever gets a chance to spend it, but getting the money into the account is only half the battle. A shocking number of middle-class savers diligently fund their retirement accounts only to leave the cash sitting in a default money market settlement fund. Mark made this exact mistake for 3 years, assuming his money was automatically growing just because it was inside a 401k. Holding cash in a retirement account earning 4% while inflation runs at 3% is like storing ice cubes in a warm room. Your nominal balance might look stable, but your actual purchasing power is melting away year after year. Once the capital is finally invested in stocks, the middle-class mindset faces its ultimate psychological test, the inevitable 20% market correction. How an investor behaves during these scary downturns permanently dictates which social class they will retire in. When the stock market dipped last autumn, Mark watched his portfolio drop by $18,000, panicked, and sold his holdings to stop the bleeding. In doing so, he transformed the temporary paper fluctuation into a permanent, irreversible destruction of capital. This emotional trading stems from treating shares of businesses like lottery tickets rather than fractional ownership in real cash-generating corporations. When grocery stores offer a 20% discount, people rush to buy, yet when the stock market goes on sale, the middle class runs for the exits. During that exact same market pullback, Sarah did not even check her account balance or watch the financial news. Her automated $800 monthly buy orders simply executed as usual, quietly acquiring shares of world-class companies at deep bargain prices. This behavioral divide explains why Delbar research shows the average retail investor earns just 5.5% annually over a 20-year period. While the broader market grows by nearly 10%, emotional buying at the top and selling at the bottom robs the middle class of their rightful compounding. Even if Mark manages to hold on to his stocks, another silent predator is waiting outside his retirement accounts every April: tax drag. By trading individual stocks in a taxable brokerage account, he regularly triggers short-term capital gains taxed at his top marginal income rate of 24%. Frequent trading in taxable accounts effectively invites the IRS to act as your senior business partner, taking a massive cut of your gains while absorbing none of your losses. Every dollar paid in unnecessary taxes is a soldier permanently removed from your wealth-building army. Seasoned wealth builders neutralize this tax drain by prioritizing tax-sheltered vehicles like the Roth IRA, where growth and future withdrawals are 100% tax-free. Once capital enters a Roth account, it is permanently shielded from government taxation, allowing compounding to accelerate without friction. By maxing out her $7,000 annual Roth IRA contribution from age 25 to 60, Sarah is projected to accumulate over $1.8 million in pure untaxed purchasing power. When she retires, she will keep every single dollar of that wealth, while Mark will surrender roughly a quarter of his traditional distributions to taxes. Despite the incredible power of tax-free accounts, many middle-class families ignore them completely because they believe they already own the ultimate investment, their house. This brings us to the biggest real estate misconception, keeping six-figure earners trapped in the rat race. Mark proudly boasts that his $400,000 suburban home is his greatest financial asset, viewing his monthly mortgage payment as a forced savings account. He conveniently ignores the $12,000 he spends annually on property taxes, homeowners insurance, interest, and roof repairs. A primary residence is actually a lifestyle consumption item, much like a luxury car that happens to appreciate because it constantly drains your cash flow instead of feeding it. Unless you rent out rooms or sell it to downsize, your house does not buy your groceries or pay for your healthcare in retirement. True wealth requires accumulating productive assets that put money into your pocket while you sleep, such as dividend-paying index funds or cash-flowing rental properties. Until your portfolio generates enough passive income to cover your living expenses, you remain completely dependent on your labor. This fundamental distinction explains why Mark's net worth has stalled at $85,000 despite his impressive $120,000 salary. Meanwhile, Sarah has quietly crossed the $400,000 net worth milestone on a modest $75,000 income simply by buying real assets instead of expensive illusions. Sarah did not inherit a trust fund or pick a lucky meme stock. She built a boring automated system that removes human emotion and fee drag from the equation. She understands that building lasting wealth is not about how much you earn, but how efficiently you convert labor into compounding capital. The middle-class wealth trap is ultimately an educational failure. Our school system trains us to be diligent employees and loyal consumers, but never capital owners. When you only know how to trade time for money, you are forced to work until the day you die. Once you finally master these mechanics and build a sizable portfolio, however, a brand new danger emerges as you approach financial independence. How you withdraw your money in retirement can trigger a hidden tax and sequence of returns trap that can destroy a lifetime of careful saving in just 5 years. At age 45, Mark earns $140,000 a year but leaks massive wealth by treating his taxable brokerage like a savings account while ignoring tax drag. Every dividend he receives triggers an immediate 15% federal tax bite, quietly bleeding his compounding momentum. This exposes the difference between asset allocation and asset location. While Mark dumps high-yielding real estate and bond funds into his regular brokerage, Sarah strategically shields those exact same tax-inefficient assets inside her 401k and Roth IRA. Over 20 years on a $500,000 portfolio, eliminating this annual tax drag adds an extra $187,000 to Sarah's net worth. She achieved this six-figure boost without taking on a single drop of additional market risk. When income surpasses the IRS threshold of $161,000 for singles or $240,000 for couples, average earners assume tax-free Roth compounding is permanently off limits. Mark stops contributing entirely, missing out on decades of tax-sheltered growth. Seasoned wealth builders bypass this ceiling by executing a backdoor Roth IRA conversion. Sarah contributes a non-deductible $7,000 to a traditional IRA, then immediately converts it to her Roth account before any taxable gains accumulate. Yet this maneuver holds a hidden trap known as the IRS pro rata rule. Because Mark left an old $40,000 rollover IRA sitting around from a previous employer, his attempted conversion triggers an unexpected tax bill on 85% of the transfer. To disarm this tax bomb, smart accumulators clean up their traditional IRA balances before executing a conversion. Sarah rolls her old pre-tax accounts directly into her current employer's 401k, clearing the slate for zero-tax backdoor conversions every single year. Another major blind spot for the middle class is treating the health savings account as a simple debit card for routine medical copays. Spending your HSA balance on immediate doctor visits destroys its potential as an elite retirement vehicle. In reality, the HSA is the only account in the US tax code offering a triple tax advantage. You get an upfront tax deduction, tax-free compounding, and tax-free withdrawals for qualified medical expenses at any age. By paying her current $2,500 annual medical bills out of pocket and investing her $4,150 HSA contribution in the S&P 500, Sarah builds an extra $312,000 tax-free medical nest egg by age 65. This single contrarian habit transforms a healthcare expense into a lasting wealth generator. Because the IRS sets no time limit on reimbursing yourself for past medical expenses, saving your digital receipts creates a tax-free line of credit. Decades later, Sarah can withdraw thousands of dollars tax-free to fund her early retirement lifestyle against those old receipts. When it comes to debt management, the middle class often prioritizes emotional comfort over mathematical logic. Mark rushes to pay off his 3.2% fixed-rate mortgage early, celebrating his debt-free status while starving his investment accounts. By locking extra cash into illiquid home equity, Mark earns a nominal 3.2% return while forfeiting the historical 10% average annual return of a low-cost index fund. Over a 15-year mortgage, that opportunity cost erodes over $150,000 in potential wealth. Wealth builders understand that fixed-rate debt during inflationary periods is actually an asset through the mechanism of debt devaluation. When inflation averages 3%, the real inflation-adjusted cost of Sarah's monthly $1,800 mortgage payment steadily shrinks, while her invested capital expands. As income rises, the middle class routinely falls victim to lifestyle creep by budgeting with fixed dollar amounts rather than percentage rules. When Mark lands a $15,000 raise, his spending immediately expands by $12,000, keeping his actual savings rate stagnant at 8%. Sarah defends her compounding engine by enforcing a strict 50-50 raise capture rule. Whenever her compensation increases, she automatically routes half of the net raise directly into her investment accounts before the cash ever hits her checking account. Another persistent middle-class illusion is viewing primary home ownership as a superior investment strategy. Mark boasts that his $400,000 house appreciated to $600,000 over 10 years, believing he made an effortless $200,000 profit. Once you subtract property taxes, insurance premiums, 6% realtor commissions, and mandatory roof replacements, Mark's true annualized return drops below 2.1%. A primary residence is primarily a consumption item and a forced savings account, not an efficient wealth multiplier. True wealth is built on productive assets that generate independent cash flow without requiring constant capital injections. While Mark's home demands ongoing repairs just to maintain its structure, Sarah's dividend-paying index funds deposit fresh cash into her account without asking for a dime. When market volatility strikes, average earners react emotionally by freezing or selling at the bottom. During a 15% market correction, Mark stops logging into his brokerage account, hoping the red numbers simply vanish. Conversely, the millionaire next door uses market drawdowns to execute tax loss harvesting. Sarah sells a declining ETF to lock in a $3,000 capital loss, while instantly buying a similar non-identical index fund to maintain her market exposure. Under US tax law, that harvested loss directly offsets $3,000 of her ordinary earned income. This simple mechanical swap hands her an immediate $720 tax savings at her 24% federal bracket while keeping her portfolio perfectly positioned for the recovery. To execute this legally, you must navigate the IRS wash-sale rule with mathematical precision. If you buy back a substantially identical security within 30 days before or after the sale, your tax deduction is completely disallowed. As you approach the transition from accumulation to distribution, the biggest threat to your financial independence shifts to sequence of returns risk. Experiencing a severe market crash during your first 36 months of retirement can permanently cripple a portfolio's longevity. Selling equities during a downturn to cover living expenses forces you to liquidate up to 25% more shares for the same cash income. This permanent capital destruction prevents your portfolio from ever fully recovering when the bull market returns. To neutralize this risk, seasoned wealth coaches build a cash and bond tent 5 years prior to retirement. Sarah constructs a buffer equal to 3 years of living expenses in short-term treasury bills and high-quality bonds. When stock markets plunge, Sarah halts all equity sales and draws living expenses exclusively from her stable treasury reserves. This buffer gives her growth assets the time they need to recover without realizing a single dollar of loss. Finally, lasting wealth requires transitioning from simple accumulation to robust legal asset protection and estate structuring. While average earners rely on basic wills that trap their heirs in lengthy, expensive probate courts, smart wealth builders establish a revocable living trust. By transferring ownership of her brokerage accounts and real estate into a living trust during her lifetime, Sarah ensures the private, seamless transfer of her $2.4 million estate. This single administrative habit saves her family tens of thousands of dollars in probate attorney fees and court delays. The ultimate middle-class wealth habit is automating this entire financial architecture so human emotion is completely removed from the equation. When your asset location, raise captures, and tax harvesting operate on mechanical rules, compounding works relentlessly in the background while you focus on living your life. When Mark crossed the $400,000 mark in his Vanguard index portfolio at age 48, his investments generated $32,000 in capital appreciation that year alone. That single-year gain equaled nearly half of his entire take-home pay as a logistics manager. At this exact milestone, your money officially becomes an autonomous second worker who never sleeps, calls in sick, or demands a vacation. Yet millions of everyday savers unwittingly sabotage this late-stage compounding through poor asset location. They mistakenly hold high-yield dividend funds in taxable brokerage accounts instead of sheltering them inside a Roth IRA. Whenever a corporate distribution hits a standard brokerage account, the IRS immediately slices off up to 23.8% in federal and net investment income taxes. That annual tax drag quietly bleeds out thousands of dollars before compound interest can even work its magic. Think of a Roth account as a climate-controlled greenhouse where your capital grows entirely untouched by the weather. Meanwhile, a taxable brokerage is an open garden left completely exposed to seasonal tax frosts. Once a portfolio nears 7 figures, a dangerous psychological trap emerges: the late-stage lifestyle upgrade. Earning a modest $75,000 salary no longer feels like enough when your net worth spikes, tempting savers to finance a $65,000 luxury SUV. Pulling $65,000 out of an index fund at age 50 does not just cost the sticker price, assuming a historical 8% average return. That single vehicle purchase, permanently vaporizes $303,000 of future purchasing power by age 70. The most successful middle-class investors counter this temptation by practicing intentional invisibility. They remain in the same quiet neighborhood and drive 10-year-old sedans, using stealth wealth as an impenetrable shield against status games. By the time Mark steps away from his career at age 62 with $1.4 million, he will not rely on market luck or guesswork. He plans to deploy a dynamic 4% withdrawal strategy that automatically adjusts annual payouts whenever Wall Street dips. To safeguard his principal during economic downturns, he keeps a rolling 2-year cash buffer in treasury bills currently yielding 4.5%. That simple yield cushion acts as a financial shock absorber, ensuring he never sells stock shares at a loss to pay for groceries. Slow-lasting wealth was never about accumulating flashy possessions to impress neighbors you barely even know. It has always been about systematically buying back your Monday mornings, your peace of mind, and your total personal autonomy. The true mechanism behind middle-class financial freedom is not an elite six-figure income or a lucky speculative bet. It is simply giving low-cost, broad-market index funds enough time to compound while rigorously defending your daily cash flow. Hit the like button if you value long-term freedom over short-term status symbols, and tell me in the comments what percentage of your monthly income are you currently investing. Make sure to subscribe and tap the bell, because next week we are exposing the hidden 1% advisory fee that secretly drains 2/3 of the average American's retirement nest egg.